Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm not the type to complain about cramped seats or airplane food. I just throw on my headphones, watch a movie, and try to get some sleep. The flight was completely packed. One of those massive planes with 3 rows of seats, 3 on each side and 4 in the middle. I managed to snag an aisle seat in one of the side sections, which I was pretty happy about since I could at least stretch my legs a bit during the 8-hour flight. I was settling in with my laptop when this family walked up. A husband, wife, and their toddler, who was already having a meltdown before we even took off. The kid was probably around 2 years old and clearly not happy about being on a plane. The wife sat down in the middle section right next to me with the screaming child on her lap, while the husband stood in the aisle looking around frantically. After a few minutes of looking lost, he tapped me on the shoulder and politely asked if I would mind switching seats with him because he really wanted to sit with his family. I looked up from my laptop. I get it. Traveling with a toddler has to be stressful, and I figured he probably had a seat a few rows back or something. I told him I didn't mind helping out and asked what seat he had. To my complete surprise, he said he was actually in business class. I nearly choked on my water. Business class? For real? I asked him if he was really offering me his business class seat so he could sit with his family, and he confirmed that was exactly what he was suggesting. A free upgrade to business class on an 8-hour international flight? I was already imagining the extra leg room and decent food. I told him absolutely. That worked perfectly for me. I started gathering my stuff and standing up to grab my carry-on from the overhead bin. But then he held up his hand and told me to wait. He said that actually his wife really wanted to use his business class seat and asked if I would mind taking her seat instead. I stopped mid-reach for my bag and stared at him. I asked him if he meant this middle seat right here next to the screaming toddler. He confirmed that was exactly what he meant, reminding me that I had said I would switch with them. The audacity was incredible. This guy was trying to pull a classic bait and switch, offer me the good seat to get me to agree, then swap it out for something worse than what I already had. I told him absolutely not. I explained that I wasn't switching from my aisle seat to get trapped in a middle seat next to his crying kid. I also pointed out that he had just said he wanted to sit with his family, so this didn't make sense. That's when he completely flipped. His voice got louder and he started gesturing wildly, completely blocking the aisle while other passengers were trying to board. He yelled that I had already agreed to switch seats with them and that this wasn't fair to his wife, who was planning on taking his business class seat. The logic made no sense. If his wife was planning on taking his seat, then why did he offer it to me in the first place? And why was he so desperate to sit with his family if the plan was for his wife to sit somewhere else entirely? I asked him if he was serious and pointed out that he had offered me his seat, not hers. I suggested that if he wanted to sit with his family so badly, why didn't he give his business class seat to his wife and sit in the middle himself? He got even more agitated and insisted that wasn't how this worked, reminding me again that I had said I would help them out. By this point, the toddler was screaming even louder, and other passengers were getting annoyed. I was getting pretty fed up with this guy's entitled attitude. I told him I didn't know what kind of scam he was trying to pull, but he must be on some really good drugs if he thought I was falling for this nonsense. I'll admit that wasn't my finest moment, but this guy was being completely unreasonable and holding up the entire boarding process. Finally, a flight attendant squeezed through the crowd of annoyed passengers to see what was going on. She told us that everyone needed to take their seats so they could finish boarding and asked what the problem was. Before I could explain what actually happened, this guy had the nerve to completely lie to her face. He told her that I had offered to take his wife's seat so he could sit with his family, but now I was refusing to cooperate. I told her that was complete bullshit and explained that he had offered me his business class seat, then tried to switch it to his wife's middle seat after I agreed. The passenger sitting behind me had been watching the whole thing unfold and spoke up to back me up. He told the flight attendant that I was right and that he had heard the whole conversation. He confirmed that the guy had definitely offered me the business class seat first. The flight attendant looked exhausted and clearly wasn't in the mood for games. She turned to the husband with that no-nonsense expression that flight attendant's master and asked to see his boarding pass. He reluctantly handed it over and she looked at it, then at me. She told me to grab my luggage and said she would escort me to my new seat. His wife shot him a death glare, and the toddler was still screaming. When I followed the flight attendant up to business class, I could hear them arguing behind me. I heard him trying to explain to his wife that he was trying to get them a better deal, but she wasn't having it. She called him an idiot and pointed out that now they were stuck back there while I got to enjoy his seat. The business class seat was everything I hoped it would be. Plenty of leg room, a real meal instead of peanuts, and most importantly, no screaming toddler right next to me. I spent the entire 8-hour flight in comfort, while that entitled jerk was probably getting an earful from his wife. When we landed in London, I saw them at baggage claim. The guy wouldn't even make eye contact with me, and his wife was still giving him the silent treatment. Their kid was finally asleep, but it was too little too late for them. I've been dealing with my ex-husband's wife for about 5 years now, ever since they got married. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad my ex found someone, and I genuinely wanted things to work out for everyone involved, especially for my son's sake. But this woman has been crossing boundaries since day one. My son is 15 now and plays on his high school football team. I've been to every single game I possibly could since he started playing in middle school. I'm that mom who brings snacks for the team and helps organize fundraisers. My ex shows up sometimes, but he's never been as involved as I am. That's fine, we divorced when my son was 8, and I've been his primary caretaker ever since. The problems with Karen started small. She'd buy my son clothes without asking me first, then get upset when I'd already bought his school clothes for the year. She'd schedule activities on my custody days without checking with me. But I tried to be understanding because blending families is hard. Last month, my son came home excited about a special mother-son dinner the football team was hosting. The coach had sent home information saying it was a bonding event for mothers and their sons with awards and recognition for the players. My son was so excited to take me. And honestly, I was thrilled too. We don't get many opportunities like this with his busy schedule. That's when things got weird. My son came to me yesterday looking uncomfortable. He told me that Karen was planning to go to the mother-son dinner next week. She hadn't said a word to me about this. I asked him if she had mentioned it to him directly, and he said no. He explained that his dad had told him she already bought a dress and everything, and that she was really excited about it. I tried to stay calm, but I was confused and honestly a little hurt. This was specifically a mother-son event, and while I understand she's part of his life now, she's not his mother. I am. I decided to call my ex to clear things up. When I asked him about Karen planning to attend the mother-son dinner with our son, he confirmed it was true. He said she was really looking forward to it because she considers our son her son too. I explained that I understood that, but this was specifically a mother-son event, and I was his mother, who had been planning to go with him. My ex argued that Karen had raised him too for the past 5 years and had just as much right to be there. I reminded him that she didn't raise our son, I did. She came into his life when he was 10, and he's with me most of the time anyway. My ex brushed off my concerns and said Karen had already bought a dress and told all her friends about it. He told me to just let her have this one thing. Let her have this one thing. This wasn't some random school event, this was a mother-son dinner. I decided to call Karen directly to try to work something out like adults. When I told her I wanted to talk about the football dinner next week, she got excited and said she already picked out the perfect dress and made reservations at a fancy restaurant beforehand for pictures. I explained that this was specifically a mother-son event, and I was planning to attend with my son. Karen insisted that she was his mother too, since she'd been in his life for 5 years and did just as much for him as I do. I tried to make her understand that while I knew she cared about him, I was his biological mother and had been planning to attend this event since the information came home. Karen got defensive and accused me of being selfish. She said I couldn't just exclude her from everything and that she was part of this family whether I liked it or not. I clarified that I wasn't trying to exclude her from everything, but this event was for mothers and sons. Karen got angry and yelled that she was a mother to him too, and that just because I gave birth to him didn't make me more important than her. The conversation was going nowhere, so I decided to ask my son what he wanted. He said things were getting really complicated and asked if we could both just come. I explained that it was a mother-son event designed for one mother per son. My son looked stressed and said that Karen was already so excited, and his dad had said she'd be really upset if she couldn't go. I could see my son was stressed about the whole situation, which made me even more frustrated with Karen for putting him in this position. The night of the dinner arrived and I showed up with my son when planned. I had tried calling the school to clarify their policy, but they said they'd never had this situation before and weren't sure how to handle it. We walked into the school cafeteria, which was decorated nicely with team colors and balloons. I was looking forward to this special evening with my son when I saw Karen across the room. She was wearing an elaborate cocktail dress that seemed way too fancy for a high school cafeteria event, taking pictures with my son's teammates and their mothers. My son saw her too and looked uncomfortable. He apologized for the situation and said he didn't know what to do. I told him it wasn't his fault. Karen spotted us and came over immediately. She acted surprised that I actually came and said she wasn't sure if I would, since she had told everyone she'd be there with her son. When I questioned her, calling him her son, she insisted that yes, he was her son because she'd been raising him for 5 years now. At this point, some of the other mothers were starting to notice the tension. Karen was speaking loudly, and people were looking over. She announced that she didn't know why I was being so difficult about this, that she was here and staying, and that was final. She told me I could leave if I didn't like it. One of the other mothers, who I'd talked to at previous games, came over and asked if there was some kind of problem. Karen said there wasn't any problem at all, and that she was just there with her son for the mother-son dinner. The other mother said she was confused because she thought Karen was the stepmother and that I was the mom. She mentioned seeing me at all the games. Karen got upset when she argued that being a stepmother made her just as much of a mother and that she had every right to be there. The other mother pointed out that it was a mother-son dinner where each son gets one ticket for their mother. Karen angrily declared that I shouldn't be there because she was his mother now too. At this point, the football coach came over to see what the commotion was about. When he asked if everything was okay, Karen demanded that he tell me I couldn't be there. She claimed she was the boy's mother and this was a mother-son event. The coach said he was confused because he had my son's emergency contact information and I was listed as his mother. He told Karen that she was listed as his stepmother on the forms. Karen insisted that didn't matter because she'd been raising him. The coach asked her to lower her voice, explaining that this was supposed to be a nice evening for the players and their mothers. Karen got even louder, yelling that she had bought a dress and told all her friends she was coming and that no one could kick her out. By now, the entire room was staring at us. My poor son looked like he wanted to disappear. The coach explained that each player gets one ticket for this event, and that ticket was for their mother. He said if there was a custody situation, that was something that needed to be worked out beforehand, not at the event. Karen threatened to call her lawyer and claimed this was discrimination. The coach told her that was her right, but right now he needed her to either calm down or leave so they could continue with their event. Karen looked around the room and seemed to realize that everyone was staring at her. She grabbed her purse and declared that this wasn't over when she stormed out. She yelled that she was reporting the school for discrimination against stepmothers. The coach apologized that we had to deal with that situation and suggested my son and I go get some dinner and try to enjoy the rest of the evening. The other mothers were incredibly supportive. Several came over to apologize for what happened and to make sure my son was okay. We ended up having a wonderful evening once Karen left. My son got an award for Most Improved Player and we took pictures together. He seemed to relax and actually enjoy himself once the drama was over. On the drive home, my son was quiet for a while. He apologized for Karen making such a big scene, and I told him that wasn't his fault, and he didn't do anything wrong. He said he felt bad that she was so upset, but this was supposed to be our thing. I agreed with him. He then admitted that she means well, but sometimes she tries too hard to be his mom when he already has one. The next day, my ex called me. He said Karen was really upset about the previous night. I told him I was sorry she was upset, but she had created that situation herself. He mentioned that she was talking about not coming to any more games. I said that was her choice, but she couldn't throw tantrums every time she didn't get her way. My ex accused me of not handling the situation well, but I told him I handled it fine and that she was the one who made a scene in front of our son and his entire team. I never heard Karen's threatened lawyer story come to anything. I'm a security guard at City General Hospital, and one day I was making my rounds when I heard raised voices coming from the emergency department. The hospital was packed that night. We had a multi-car accident come in earlier, plus the usual flow of patients. Every room was full, and the waiting area was overflowing. I walked over to see what the commotion was about. There was this woman at the front desk, and she was furious. Her son, maybe around 10 years old, was sitting in a wheelchair next to her. The kid looked pale and was holding his stomach. The woman was waving her hands around and yelling at our head nurse. The woman screamed that this was completely unacceptable and that her son had been waiting for 3 hours. The nurse tried to calm her down and explained that they were at full capacity that night. She told the woman they had an ambulance ready to take her son to St. Mary's Hospital across town where there was availability and he could get treated immediately. The woman refused to go anywhere. She yelled that this was the best hospital in the city and her son deserved the best care. She demanded they find him a room right away. The nurse tried to explain the situation, but this woman wasn't having it. She kept demanding special treatment, saying her insurance was premium and that she donated to the hospital's charity fund every year. The nurse repeated that the woman's son was in stable condition and that St. Mary's had excellent doctors who could help him. She explained the ambulance ride would only take 15 minutes. The woman said she didn't care about St. Mary's. She insisted her son needed to be seen at this hospital immediately. That's when she spotted an elderly man being wheeled into a room. He was probably in his 70s, looked really frail, and had an intravenous line in his arm. His adult son was walking beside the bed looking worried sick. The woman walked over to them before anyone could stop her. I started following, sensing trouble. She asked how long the old man was going to be in the room. The old man's son looked confused and asked what she meant. The woman explained she was asking about his father and how long his treatment would take. She told him her son needed this room more than the old man did. The son was shocked and told her his father was having a heart episode and needed immediate care. The woman looked the elderly man up and down with disgust. She said he was ancient and had already lived his life. She claimed her son had his whole future ahead of him, so it made more sense for him to get the room. The son told her she was out of her mind. He shouted at her to get away from his father, but the woman wasn't done. She actually pushed past him and walked right up to the elderly man's bed. She told the old man not to worry and said she was getting her son the room he deserved. What happened next was horrifying. She yanked the intravenous needle right out of the old man's wrist. Blood started dripping and the elderly man cried out in pain and confusion. The monitors started beeping like crazy. The old man asked what was happening and why she hurt him. The son completely lost it. He shoved the woman so hard she fell backwards onto the floor. She hit the ground with a loud thud. He called her a psychopath and yelled that she had just assaulted his father. Nurses came running from every direction. The woman was on the floor screaming about being attacked, while her own son was crying and asking what was wrong with his mom. The elderly man was bleeding and clearly in distress. I immediately called for backup and contacted the police. The medical staff worked quickly to get the elderly man's intravenous line back in and stabilize him. The woman got up from the floor, still ranting. She yelled that the son had pushed her and she wanted him arrested. She claimed all she did was try to help her son get proper medical care. The nurse told her she had just removed the patient's intravenous line without authorization, which was assault. The woman argued that the old man didn't need it as much as her son did. She said anyone with half a brain could see that. The police arrived within 10 minutes. I gave them my statement about what I witnessed. The security cameras had caught everything too. When the officers tried to talk to the woman, she just kept digging herself deeper. The officer told her she was being charged with assault on a patient. She called this ridiculous and said she was just trying to get her son the care he needed. She claimed the old man probably didn't even have much time left anyway. The officer explained that she had physically harmed another person who was receiving medical treatment. The woman insisted that her son's life was more valuable because he was young and had potential. She said the old man was just taking up space. Even her own son seemed embarrassed by her behavior. He begged his mom to stop talking, but she wouldn't quit. She started demanding to speak to the hospital administrator, threatening to sue everyone and claiming she was being discriminated against because she was a mother trying to protect her child. The elderly man's son was standing there holding his father's hand while the medical team checked his condition. He told everyone his father had served in the military for 20 years and worked as a teacher for 30 more. He said his father deserved respect, not this treatment. Karen shot back that her son could grow up to be a doctor and save hundreds of lives. She claimed his potential was worth more than the old man's remaining years. That comment sealed her fate. The officers arrested her right there. She was screaming about her rights and demanding a lawyer while they put the handcuffs on. While all this drama was happening, a room opened up naturally. Karen's son got the medical attention he needed without any of his mother's theatrics. Turns out he just had a stomach bug that required basic treatment. The elderly man recovered from the incident, though he had to stay an extra day for observation due to the trauma and interrupted treatment. His son thanked me for intervening and said he couldn't believe people like Karen actually existed. Karen ended up spending the night in jail and faced serious charges for patient assault. I own my river house in Laughlin, Nevada for over 20 years now. The Colorado River runs right behind my property, and there's nothing better than launching my boat from my own dock and cruising the calm waters. Back in the day, this neighborhood was quiet. Most of us were weekend warriors who'd come out to fish, boat, and maybe have a few beers while watching the sunset. But times changed. Over the past 5 years, more than half my neighbors started turning their places into short-term vacation rentals. The money's good, I'll give them that, but I've seen what some of these party groups can do to a property. My neighbor directly to the left learned this lesson the hard way 2 summers ago. College kids rented his place for spring break and completely destroyed it. Holes punched in walls, carpet ruined, appliances broken. He won his lawsuit eventually, but it took 8 months and cost him thousands in legal fees just to get back what was rightfully his. His house sat empty for 3 months while contractors fixed the damage. That's exactly why I never got into the rental game. Sure, I could probably make decent money renting out my place on weekends, but I'd rather have my sanctuary intact than deal with that headache. I work 60 hours a week in construction management, and this house is where I come to recharge. This past 4th of July weekend started like any other holiday for me. I loaded up my truck with groceries, beer, and fishing gear, planning to spend 4 peaceful days on the water. I arrived Friday afternoon and immediately noticed the chaos next door. Cars were parked everywhere, music was blasting, and people were already stumbling around drunk at 3 in the afternoon. The house next door had been rented to what looked like a group of guys in their 20s. I counted at least 30 people crammed into that 3-bedroom place. They had a nice boat on a trailer in the driveway, but it just sat there for 2 full days while they focused entirely on drinking. Friday night wasn't too bad. Loud music until about midnight, but I've dealt with worse. Saturday morning is when things went downhill fast. I was sitting on my back patio having coffee when someone from next door threw an empty beer bottle that shattered right next to my feet. Glass went everywhere. I walked over to their patio where about 15 people were already drinking and clearly wasted. I politely asked them to clean up the broken glass from the bottle they had thrown onto my property. The apparent ringleader, a stocky guy with sunglasses, barely looked at me and claimed they hadn't thrown anything. He suggested maybe the wind had blown the bottle over. I pointed out that wind doesn't typically throw beer bottles 20 feet sideways. The guy got defensive and told me they were paying good money to party and that I should just relax and mind my own business. I kept my cool and went back to clean up the glass myself. This was just the beginning. Saturday afternoon, they were throwing trash directly into the river. Beer cans, food containers, cigarette butts. The Colorado River isn't just our backyard, it's everyone's responsibility to keep it clean. Saturday night was absolute chaos. Music so loud I could feel the bass in my chest, people screaming, fights breaking out. I called the property owner 3 times but only reached his voicemail each time. Sunday morning around 10 of the drunkest guys finally decided to launch their boat. I was on my dock getting ready to take my own boat out when I watched this disaster unfold. They backed the trailer to the water's edge, but not one of them was sober enough to operate properly. They got the boat in the water, but couldn't figure out how to get it off the trailer. After 20 minutes of shouting and confusion, they finally got it free and jumped in. The designated driver was so drunk he could barely stand. He started the engine and moved the boat maybe 5 feet from shore before stopping completely. That's when I saw the Nevada Department of Wildlife boat approaching fast. The officers had been watching the whole thing. Within minutes, all 10 guys were in handcuffs being loaded into boats headed for shore. Drunk boating is a serious offense in Nevada, and drunk in public isn't taken lightly either. Their boat got impounded on the spot. The rest of their group back at the house went completely ballistic when they saw their friends getting arrested. They started throwing more trash, breaking bottles intentionally, and screaming at the officers. The noise was incredible. By Sunday evening, the remaining 20 people were loading up their cars to leave. That's when I noticed several of them were still clearly intoxicated and getting behind the wheel. I made a quick decision and wrote down every license plate number I could see. I called the local police and reported multiple drunk drivers leaving the area. I gave them the plate numbers and descriptions of the vehicles. The officer asked if I had actually witnessed them drinking and driving. I explained that I had watched them drink heavily all weekend and could see they were clearly impaired when they got into their cars. The officer told me they would position units on the main routes out of town to intercept them. Sure enough, within an hour I heard from a neighbor that 3 more carloads had been pulled over. Most of the remaining group got arrested for drunk driving, drunk in public, and several had drug possession charges when officers searched their vehicles during the arrests. Nevada doesn't mess around with drug possession like California does. These guys picked the wrong state to be stupid in. Monday morning, I finally reached the property owner on the phone. He apologized and said he had no idea things had gotten so bad because he was out of town with his family all weekend. I told him his house was completely trashed, with garbage everywhere, broken glass scattered around, and what looked like significant damage to his furniture. He said he would drive out that afternoon to see the damage for himself. When he arrived, his face said it all. The house was destroyed. Holes in walls, carpet stained beyond repair, broken furniture, and garbage everywhere. The smell was nauseating. The property owner ended up having to completely renovate the interior. He later told me the damage exceeded $15,000, and that was after insurance. The security deposit barely covered a fraction of it. The party group learned that Nevada justice moves fast. Most of them spend the entire week in county jail before they could make bail. The drug possession charges meant several faced serious felony charges. I heard their parents had to hire expensive lawyers, and some of them are still dealing with court cases months later. Turns out when you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions between Nevada and California, plus federal charges for some of the drug offenses, legal fees add up fast. My neighbor thanked me for helping document everything and calling in the license plates. Most customers where I worked were pleasant enough. They'd come in looking for vintage clothes, furniture, or just browsing for fun finds. But there was this one woman who made my stomach drop every time I saw her approaching my register. She never bothered learning my name, never made small talk, and always had something to complain about. The prices were too high for used items. The selection wasn't good enough. The store was too crowded. Nothing was ever right for her. Every few days she'd walk up to my register with that same sour expression, dump her items on the counter, and start her complaints before I could even say hello. I'd smile and try to be helpful, but she treated me like I personally set the prices and stocked the shelves. The worst part was how she'd talk to me like I was stupid. speaking slowly and loudly when I couldn't understand basic English. After months of this treatment, I was completely burned out. The stress was affecting my sleep and I'd started dreading going to work. I built up some vacation time, so I decided to take a week and a half off, timing it perfectly with my regular days off to give myself almost 2 weeks away from the store. During my time off, I focused on my health. I've been working on losing weight for months, and by the time I was ready to return to work, I dropped down to around 170 pounds. It was the lowest I'd been in years. I still had some weight around my midsection, but I felt confident and energetic. I bought some new work shirts that fit better and felt ready to tackle whatever the job threw at me. My first day back, I was stationed at Register 3, feeling refreshed and optimistic. The morning had gone smoothly with friendly customers and easy transactions. Then I saw her walking toward my register, and that familiar dread crept back in. But something was different this time. Instead of her usual scowl, she looked almost surprised to see me. When she approached with her small pile of items, she actually spoke first, which never happened. She told me she didn't realize I was back so soon from my maternity leave. I stood there confused, not understanding what she meant. When I expressed my confusion, she explained that she thought I had taken time off to take care of my baby. I processed what she'd just said with complete bewilderment. In all the months she'd been coming through my line, not once had I mentioned having children. I don't have kids, never have, and certainly wasn't pregnant when I left for vacation. There hadn't been any pregnant women working at our store since I'd been hired. I politely told her she must be thinking of someone else, but she insisted that she was pretty sure it was me and asked if I was certain about my own situation. The audacity of this woman asking me if I was sure about my own life hit me like a brick wall. Here she was, someone who'd never bothered to learn my name or show me basic courtesy, confidently telling me about my own supposed pregnancy and maternity leave. The whole situation was so absurd that I decided to be completely blunt. I told her that I wasn't pregnant and never had been, and that I was just fat. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear a pin drop. Karen's face went through several expressions: confusion, embarrassment, then something that looked almost like panic. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Behind her in line, I noticed another customer's jaw had literally dropped. The woman was staring at Karen with a mix of shock and second-hand embarrassment. A man further back in line was trying not to smile, clearly having heard the whole exchange. I continued scanning Karen's items with a pleasant smile, acting like nothing unusual had happened. A used sweater, a paperback book, and a small picture frame. I told her the total came to $8.43. Karen fumbled with her wallet, clearly flustered. She handed me a $10 bill without making eye contact. I counted out her change and placed her items in a bag, then cheerfully told her to have a great day. Karen grabbed her bag and practically speed-walked toward the exit without saying a word. Not even a thank you or goodbye. The customer behind her stepped forward, shaking her head. She said she couldn't believe Karen had asked me such a rude question. I just shrugged and said some people make assumptions. After my shift ended, I told my coworkers about what had happened. When I got to the break room, my teammate Sarah was eating lunch. She asked how my first day back had gone, and I told her she wouldn't believe what happened. I told her the whole story, and she was laughing so hard she nearly choked on her sandwich. She said she couldn't believe I had actually said that to Karen's face and thought it was amazing. I explained that I didn't know what else I was supposed to say when she basically called me pregnant when I was clearly just overweight. Sarah pointed out that Karen had been rude to me for months, and the one time she tried to be nice by acknowledging what she thought was a major life event, she completely put her foot in her mouth. Over the next few weeks, Karen continued to come into the store, but something had fundamentally changed. She'd still come through my line occasionally, but gone were the complaints and attitude. She'd place her items on the counter, pay quickly, and leave without a word. No more lectures about pricing or store policies. No more treating me like I was beneath her. The other employees had heard the story by then, and whenever Karen came in, someone would inevitably catch my eye and smirk. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.